Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Patient First Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan Laskin. And as always, I'm very excited that you're here. And we have today a great speaker on a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I think you're going to learn a lot. We have Frank Lobb, who's a retired U.S. Navy pilot with a distinguished career, including leadership roles at DuPont and consulting on regulatory law and compliance. His expertise led to forcing the EPA to rewrite the Clear Air Act's compliance section and uncovering hidden insurance provisions that deny patients coverage. Now retired, he continues to apply his knowledge to exposing fraud and misrepresentation in the health insurance industry. Oh my gosh, we have a common goal there. His book, The Big Lie in My Healthcare Bill, Why I Don't Owe What My Insurer Fails to Pay, presents the solution he has sought for a long time to fix the system. Frank, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I really look forward to it.
We're going to be talking today, I think, about healthcare transparency. And this is a massive topic, in my opinion. So could you help set the stage for kind of why you wrote the book and the big problem that you're solving?
I love your word transparency because we are a great country. We really are. And I've had a long career in new business and building businesses and managing them and so forth. And certainly had a fair career in the Navy. And we are very good, if we're honest with each other, at solving problems. But the one thing I learned the hard way is if you can't define the problem up front honestly between you, you cannot solve it. And boy, are we getting in that hole. We are more and more unwilling to look honestly at the problem. And if we don't do that, we can't solve it. It just gets worse. And so the reason I'm here is that I had a unique situation where I had to really look at what healthcare is. How does health insurance work? And it took me 8 years through the courts to get to their inner documents. And what I found was that inner documents that control the system are completely opposite from what they're telling us. And it hurts. And what makes this pretty much appropriate time is if you have the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, over the past year, telling us that we have to look at every healthcare bill for accuracy because they're in the area of 80% in error, rife with error, I'm quoting, and more than 50% of family bankruptcies are an unpaid healthcare bill. And you just had the CEO of United Healthcare killed up in New York, and people celebrated it. And that's not my words. That's the press, Wall Street Journal, and so forth. The anger in the country at how they're being mistreated by the healthcare system is huge. It's there. And I can't fix it. I'm not even going to try. But I think I can help people understand why there's so much anger and failure in the healthcare system.
Yeah, and there's obviously this isn't a 20-minute conversation. This is a very large conversation, which I'm excited to explore. This is near and dear to my heart because I think it's the Patient First Podcast. I'm very much about patient advocacy. And the more and more that we build out interoperability through our application Toothapps, and we're connecting more with systems like Epic and other EMRs, and also having some personal experiences, sharing with others and hearing their personal experiences. My suspicion is that what led you down this pathway, it probably is not unique. I think this problem hits every single American. Do you agree?
Yeah, what led me down this path was years ago, my wife was very ill and our insurance refused to give her the care she needed. The doctor was prescribing it. She was near death. This was serious. And the insurance industry or the insurance company refused coverage. And the hospital said they couldn't give her the care she needed. So I said, fine, forget the insurance company. I'll pay for it. And they told me I couldn't. And I went through 3 other hospitals and was told the same thing. As long as my insurer was refusing coverage, they could not accept payment for the care. And she died. So following her death, I went nuts. Quite honestly, I could not understand how an insurance company could stop me from paying for the care my wife needed, and her doctor was literally pleading for. And so it took 8 years through the courts. I finally learned because under our system of justice, there's a discovery process and you can get access to the inner documents. And it took years, but I fought my way through the courts. And fortunately, I had some background in the law and compliance and so forth. And I knew that they had to be there and I had to be able to get at them. And I did. And so what I'm trying to share with people today is what I learned by being able to read their documents that describe the healthcare coverage that we're actually owed, but never told.
So first of all, I'm sorry that you've had to go through this. And what a horrible experience. But I don't think you're alone. I think this is happening daily
Oh,
across and my wife had a similar issue with it, with a test where we were told we couldn't get the test. And then we said the same thing. I don't care if insurance pays for it. And they told us 5 times that that we can't have the test. But my wife just showed up and I told her to just show up and pay for it. So she did. And turns out, I'll tell you, it's an $8,000 test that I guess in the state of Minnesota, if you pay out of pocket, it's $3,200. And so my theory, and this is the theory that I've run by other people, I haven't gone, so this is my question for you. I suspect what's going on is the hospitals want, because there's a limited amount of time for this one machine that's only in one spot in the state of Minnesota, that they're looking to fill it up with $8,000 patients, not $3,200 patients, because it's a well-meaning law says that if you're paying out of pocket, you pay less than insurance companies. So when you uncovered this, because you've gone deeper than I have, this is, literally a life or death test for my wife that now she's going through treatment now and has a good prognosis. However, I just think of the millions of people that get told they can't have this test done. Very few people are just going to show up when they're told it costs thousands and thousands of dollars, and it ends up being $3,200. So I'll pause there and say, is that directionally what you found out as you uncovered your what happened with your wife?
It's a great place to start because yes, I learned how the system actually works and have been able to protect my family and get everything we're owed for quite some time. When a bad healthcare bill comes, I write a simple little letter and it vanishes. Not because I'm so smart, but because their own documents say it has to vanish and they don't dare contest it. I had a dental bill. Actually, it was surgery where I was in the chair, actually as close to the surgery as you could get, strapped in, and they came in with a credit card machine for $3,000. And this was just, 3 months ago. And I had to come up with $3,000 or they wouldn't finish it. So I gave them a credit card. But I came out of there and immediately contested the bill. The $3,000 was back before you could snap your fingers. And the company, the surgical unit, hospital, never tried to contest the bill or defend the bill. They just gave me the $3,000 back. They sent me 2 letters asking me if I'd come back for an additional procedure. I went somewhere else. And then they sent me a birthday card, which kind of indicates just how separated they are from the real world of their contracts. All I did was come out of there and say, look, I'm not a dummy. I know what the law is. And what you've just done is fraud. Period. Simple little letter. Nope. Didn't say much more than I just said, but I got the $3,000 back. And what I've tried to do with this book is arm individuals with enough information that they can make the existing system work. Because there are 2 points that I want to stress. The way the contracts are structured is that you get all the medically necessary care as long as you're in network, all the medically necessary care the doctor prescribes, period. And then the insurance company gets the right to decide whether they want to pay for it. And if they decide they don't, and this could be months later, because they can approve it today and 6 months later change their mind and claw the money back. It's called a utilization review. It's in every contract. The key point here being you get the care, but you need to know you were owed the care. And then whether the insurance company pays their in-network provider is truly up to the insurance company. They have the contractual right to say no, pay zero, but the rest of that provision is they can't bill you for it.
Now, I want to pause you here because our audience typically is dental practices dealing with dental insurance, which is a different deal than medical insurance. It's a completely different case from that perspective. Obviously, there's a legal contract, but what's medically necessary really doesn't enter the sphere of a dental insurance company's mindset, right? From a dental within dentistry, dentists don't, this is as much a question as a statement, but I've looked into this quite a bit. Dental insurance, basically, dentists can just charge patients whatever they want beyond dental insurance. Now, obviously, if it's a contracted reduced rate or whatever, they can, but you're not going to find a dentist that has a $3,000 procedure that isn't covered by dental insurance. Say, I'm not going to charge the patient. But whereas in medical, it's different, correct?
Absolutely. And there's a crossover there, but it's also not well understood.
The
I
crossover
just,
basically is not being used at all, but I think that's happening now more and more with Medicare Advantage and some other, like, I believe that that crossover is going to happen more and more, which is why this podcast I think is very timely. If you're billing for medical insurance
oh, the,
reimbursement, everything you're saying is very true.
the dentist that I was talking to just yesterday, he has a very successful practice. He's started by his father. They are known as the very best practice in this area of Pennsylvania. And he's being pressured by the investment community to sell his practice, allow them to use his name, and then really establish an investment vehicle, not a dentist vehicle. They don't want to be in the dentistry business. They want to be in the investment business, promote the name, get it bigger, and then resell it. And so what we have is where I'm an old guy. I'm 87. When I was younger and my parents and so forth, the doctor was our doctor. The dentist was my dentist and so forth. But almost everything today is owned by really an investment company. If I don't know whether
Yeah, I'm going to interject here too, because as a dentist that has worked with thousands of dentists and seen what's happened over the last 25 years in dentistry. 25 years ago, you're right. Most dental practices were a single dentist that owned their practice. But I would go to the laboratories and quality work was garbage. It was very bad. Now, I'm probably offending half my audience here, but like when I would go to the laboratory and look at the work that was done, I would think there should be some type of quality control. Now, what you say, I think, is very much true going on. Private equity money and investment money is flowing into dentistry like crazy. But I also think with all of the negatives, and there's a lot, there's also some semblance of quality control. So I don't think it's all bad. Like I think that there's pluses and minuses to everything. There's good people and bad people in all the industries. But when you distill this all down, I feel like that at the end of this, there has to be guardrails on what people do. It doesn't matter if it's a health insurance company, a dental insurance company, a dental practice, an investment company that's investing in dental practices. I just don't see that there's guardrails. That's where I'm concerned.
there are none.
Do you agree?
Agree with you. There just aren't any. And one of the reasons that it's so dangerous is because what they want to do is drag the average patient down into the grass, where the details are so numerous and complex, you don't have a clue what's going on.
When you say they, who are you talking about that wants to drive
That's
in?
a great question, and I appreciate it because it's the term "they" is too easily
Insurance and dental insurance companies, it's who
in
I
a
would
market.
identify as the they.
In a market, there are forces, okay? And when I mean that, I don't mean individuals, and I don't mean a company. I really mean the driving forces behind the market. For the most part, and I'm going to put dental in with the medical for a second here. These are, for the most part, from the insurance side, they are definitely a monopoly. The regional monopolies control insurance,
Health insurance.
health insurance.
Yeah.
And there aren't that many in the dental either.
Fair enough. Yeah. But I think the reason why I want
Let
to
me, let me take
clarify
this a
is,
little further
yeah.
because
Okay. Sounds good.
basically there isn't any competition out there. The big ones control. In the health, on the medical side, you can find small players too. But basically, the market is structured as a monopoly. The other side of it, though, it's inelastic. That's huge. I've got a degree in economics. I don't consider myself that well versed in it, but I do remember those bases. In other words, when you give somebody or an industry a monopoly in an inelastic market, patient beware, because transparency is not the game. The game is money. And I think I can marry both your issues and the medical issues easily through the money. It's huge. When you look at the healthcare money in the United States, it's $4.3 trillion a year, give or take a few $100 million. It's so large, it's attracted investment people. So let me just, and it's not just the medical side. I loved your use of the word transparency because we're in the hardware and supply business. And we took 2 years ago, we took a serious look at building another business. We've been quite successful. We could try to take the model somewhere else. But our model's a customer. And what we found is that we could not find another location where we weren't in the real estate business. It costs so much to buy the business or else to buy the real estate to put you in the business that you really couldn't recoup it in the hardware business. You had to recoup it by the investment and then being willing to sell it 10 years down the road when it was worth more. Is that understandable or making sense?
Oh yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah.
And we have the same thing in both the medical side and the dentistry side. You're the expert on the dentistry side. I'll hang my hat on the medical side. But I think our issues are pretty much the same. We've lost transparency.
I would say that there's more transparency on the dental side than on the medical side. However, it's still transparency now, but in different. I like to say that dentistry and medicine are both messed up in different ways, right? When it comes to transparency on dental, the dentists have transparency into kind of what's going on, but patients have zero. Patients really get nothing. And that's what we're trying to do with Toothapps. And one of the things is giving patients, for example, we've built the My Chart for dentistry so patients can actually have access to their records. That the federal government has helped with that on the medical side by creating legislation that dentistry is completely ignored, which is why we're providing that service. But on the medical side, it's like there's no treatment planning. There's no, these are your options. What do you want to pay for? And I think that's incredibly problematic. I also feel like particularly when we're talking about health insurance, and this is where I would love to get your perspective on this too. I feel if our plan to solve the major problems in medicine is to rely on the good faith of medical insurance companies, we're screwed, right? Or if it's like the busy physicians are going to like just suddenly pull their head up from their busy day and go, "Oh, I'm going to solve this problem for the industry." That's not going to happen. I think this has to be from a regulatory perspective. I think what's missing is the enforcement of existing laws on the insurance companies and on the healthcare system more broad. The laws exist, but they're not being followed. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but I totally agree on one hand, and on the other hand, I have some concerns. You mentioned earlier that I was very involved in the Clean Air Act, and I was a single voice there, but I also had a DuPont hat on. So I had the ability to go down and meet with the secretary.
Was your DuPont hat made with forever chemicals? I'm sorry, that was a bad joke.
No, well, yeah, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I represented DuPont, big name, and I could get an audience to make a presentation to Secretary Browner, which I did. And I could literally stand there and say, "Hey, if you don't do this, we're going to sue you and you're going to lose." Now, the only reason I could do that is I had found some very clear words from Congress that were exactly the opposite from what EPA was doing. So I could say, here are the words. What you're doing is not presumptively credible. And therefore, if we sue you, you will lose. On the other hand, we recognize you have to make that you have to write this compliance section and we'll help you do it, but within the instructions of Congress. And within 3 days, they had my charts and I was helping and we reshaped the whole thing. I don't think you can do that in healthcare. Nobody has that kind of power. And there is no single bottom line. I think
I
what you
don't
have to
know.
do is advocate for yourself that you can make the system work, whether you're a provider in that hospital, doctor, or dentist. But you have to take the time to understand how the system is actually structured. And that's where the system collapses or where the patient is really put at risk because the transparency you talked about early on just isn't there.
I totally agree with you on the medical side. On the dental side, or sorry, on the dental side. I think on the dental side, if dentists take the time to explain, to have the conversations with patients, to really look at, because they at the end of this within dentistry, it's up to the patient to make the calls. On the medical side, there's been so much, I'd say, it's not really brainwashing, but there's so many administrators that control what happens at whatever insurance companies pay that I think it has to come from higher up. I personally don't feel like the nurse practitioner, the physician who's busy every day is going to be able to really to to implement to understand this, because to your point, it's complicated. And it's purposely complicated. On the dental side, it's so much cleaner. It's so much easier. It's like your dental insurance company doesn't cover it. This is the cost. Do you want to pay for it? Do you want third party financing? But on the medical side, I personally don't think that those nurses and oncologists that were telling my wife, we can't schedule you because they don't even know how much this procedure costs. They've just been told not to
Oh,
schedule
no,
patients without.
impossible,
And so
impossible.
I think it's impossible for the medical professionals to solve this issue. And frankly, I don't think that the medical insurance company has any incentive to. And everybody, if you look at the first response from UHG when the CEO was unfortunately murdered, like they're basically saying there's so much fraud, waste, and abuse in medicine. Let's talk about being tone deaf. Like everybody's right. I think it's up to the legislators to enforce the laws that exist on these companies to provide the transparency that. But that's obviously
Yeah,
I haven't studied
obviously.
as much as you, but I'm in the process of doing a lot of research on this, and I just feel like there's misalignment of incentives on the medical insurance side that.
But
Do you agree with that?
actually, no, because I've been to Washington and I've talked to those people after I learned everything. At least I thought there was to know about the insurance industry. And what I'm talking about is their secret contracts.
Okay.
And I thought I could go to Washington and just help people understand, help the legislators understand what's in those contracts because they had no clue. But boy, did they turn a deaf ear. They didn't want to know. And nothing's changed. There is so much money awash in what I don't think you're going to get them very interested. You're going to have a hard time. And they certainly aren't going to take the time to understand this issue like you do or like I do. They they
I,
won't
I'm
get
not saying
that
that they're
time.
right now that they're motivated to. I'm saying that is what, and I would argue, we're saying the same thing. I would
Well,
argue that the reason why the legislators are not interested is because they're probably in bed with the health insurance companies, right? There's right. So
yep.
what the pressure, but the change is not going to happen on the medical insurance or on the healthcare provider level. The change has to come from the top because the laws are in place that can provide the transparency, but they're turning a deaf ear to it because of lobbyists on the other side. And maybe would you argue that's incorrect?
Yeah, we're really pretty much saying the same thing. We're just coming
Yeah,
at it a
that's
little differently. And whether the courts prefer the horse or the horse before the court. Yeah. What marries both dentistry and healthcare I'm sorry, and medical care is who makes a decision what's needed. And only the doctor can do that. And what the system does, whether it's dental or health or a medical, is the insurance company wants to step forward and make that decision, never having seen the patient. Show
Totally
me,
agree.
show me in law where that works.
We are saying the exact same thing. But it's not a slight nuance between dental insurance and medical insurance. It's a
Yeah,
dramatic chasm in how the two work together. And on the dental side, I believe it is up to the dental professionals because we can look at this and educate patients and I think we don't have the malaligned incentives that are going on the medical side. But on the medical side, I believe that this has to come from the top down. I think the legislators are not doing their job enforcing the existing regulations of transparency. And for example, what you just said, I completely agree with. On the dental side, you can actually, as a dentist, talk to the patient about what's in their own best interest. On the medical side, they're not even doing that because what they're doing first is saying, what does your medical insurance cover? And that's what I'm going to propose to you. And I think
but
we're both aligned in that that is the core issue we're trying to solve.
exactly. And the reason this works so well is that nobody thinks to ask what the standing is for the insurance doctor that's making a decision not to cover a particular procedure. Okay. That
Good
insurance
point.
person has no standing. So if I'm in that discussion, I'm going to look him in the eye and say, I don't care what you say. You have no standing in the matter. And you want to debate this in court? Let's try it. They'll walk away because they don't. Okay. Now, 30 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that health, medical insurance, and so forth has a right to ration health care. So they can deny coverage, but they can't deny care. And you have the same thing in health, dentistry. And the way they do it is they just deny. Matter of fact, they come back to the Supreme Court. They basically said, as a matter of fact, they said explicitly that rationing is the whole point of private insurance. So the insurance industry is well set up to deny care. And the problem they have is they have no legal right to decide care, only the right to deny
I
coverage.
I think
Okay.
we are both saying the exact same thing that regardless of how the care is paid for, one of the very biggest issues I think that we have as a nation is that people aren't even given the choice of care. It's being the because of it's being dictated what's being offered on the medical side. And certainly as a dentist, like if you're looking at the patient's dental insurance first and just treatment planning based on what their dental insurance would cover, I would argue that's problematic and certainly give patients their options too. But I do think it's less of an issue on the dental side. However, it absolutely is an issue. But on the medical side, for the patients that are listening, for the professionals that are obviously every healthcare provider is also a patient, right? On the medical side, I strongly could not highlight what you're saying enough that you have to be your own advocate. Um,
And the doctor or the dentist I've had for many years, the one I mentioned earlier, where I've helped him, at least I'm putting words in his mouth, and it's always a little dangerous, but I've known him very well. And what I've stressed and helped him with is he needs, when he has a problem, to push back that the insurance company has no standing. It's his medical judgment and that's what's required. And as long as you stay on that ground, you're on solid ground. The minute you get into a technical discussion between two equals for determining what the patient needs, there's a problem and you will lose. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. I'm gonna restate it because I think that's a very good point to end on. If you're seeing the patient, you've seen the patient, you've done the clinical diagnosis, and if the insurance company is pushing it back against covering you based on your diagnosis and treatment plan, they have no standing because you are the doctor of record or the healthcare provider for that patient, and it is up to you to come up with you and the patient. to come up with the treatment plan, not the dental insurance company or the health insurance company or to dictate treatment. So that is something you can definitely hold your hat on when you're having conversations. And you will have to, as I've had to, push back on dental insurance companies and saying, no, you're wrong. You have, this is the diagnosis. This is the treatment plan. This is what we went ahead with. Whatever the coverage says doesn't, that is irrelevant to the diagnosis and treatment.
What I'm going to suggest is the more knowledgeable you are as a dentist or a doctor, the more respect you're going to get from the insurance companies because they don't want this discussion. They're on the wrong side of the issue. And what they really want to do is just deny care or delay payment and then be able to walk away. And the minute the facts change, the game changes. But to argue that fact or to play that game, you have to understand their vulnerability. And what I've said, and I say in the book, the way you win fights is you take the other guy where he cannot go. He can't afford to go. And what does he do? He either pays you or he walks away, but he gets out of the fight.
Yeah.
And I think you have the same problem that the medical doctor has. They've changed the game where for the average individual just doesn't understand it. The average doctor doesn't understand the medical doctor. And I'm sure the average dentist doesn't understand it. And I think even though there's a difference between the dental side and the medical side, I'm going to argue it would be really advantage. You'd be at a big advantage if you read my book. And I'm not selling the book. I'm selling the understanding. Because if
where can people
they've done it,
where can people go? Again, your book is called The Big Lie in My Healthcare Bill: Why I Don't Owe What My Insurer Fails to Pay. Where can they go to get your book?
The easiest way to get the book is just go online and go to killabill.com, KILL, capital A, bill.com. And there's a QR code right there. It'll take you right to the book. But it also has a website that explains what we're trying to accomplish with the book. Because this is not an issue about selling books. Believe me, I don't need to sell books. But what I do want to see is that people are knowledgeable enough that they just can't be taken by the system. Because when I was younger, the system was honest.
So Frank, I very much appreciate you being on the podcast. I think it's an important topic. I think people should go to killabill.com to get your book. Not Kill Bill. Kill Bill's a movie that's suspiciously branded like our stuff, but go to killabill.com. Frank, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation.